Good morning, class. It is Mr. Manta here. Today's date is April 2nd, Thursday, April 2nd, 2020, and welcome to class. Here's what we got today. We have just this one last science lesson before we head off into spring break, and so I still don't want to start a new unit until we get back. So today, we're going to have, once again, another bonus lesson. Specifically today, we are talking about common myths in science, things that a lot of people, probably even you, think are true that really are not true, and we got to clear some of those up. But before we jump into that, first things first, I want to talk briefly about 1, makeup quizzes, and 2, spring break. First of all, yes, you know we took a quiz on Tuesday. Most folks did pretty well on that quiz overall, which makes me really happy to see that we're still learning stuff, even though we're not actually in a classroom. But quite a few people did get under the 60% cutoff mark. For those students who got under a 60%, you are required to make up your quiz to try it again for a better grade the second time. The makeup quiz was assigned to you if and only if you scored under a 60%. So looking at today's work, Thursday, April 2nd, if you see this assignment, Unit 5 Light Makeup Quiz, that means that unfortunately you scored under a 60% and you got to make that quiz up. Study up on your notes, look back at the other quiz, see what it is that you got wrong, and do this one a second time. Make sure we're doing it better, all right? You can even look back at the videos to help you answer some questions. That is a deal I'm going to make you, but we got to do better on that quiz. Specifically, and I gotta say, maybe I shouldn't bring this up, but Georgia Tech, I'm not sure what's up with y'all. 6th grade, you guys are dragging us down, though, at this point. There were some very low grades in 6th grade. Usually all my classes are pretty even, but this time around, 5th grade mostly killed it, and Georgia Tech, I'm not sure what happened. Quite a few of you have to take that quiz a second time. Second of all, I do want to talk about spring break. That is next week. Now, of course, it's not spring break like a usual spring break where we get to not go to school and not do any work, but hey, you're already not in school physically, and at least for science for spring break, there will be no spring break work that you are required to do. That is, if you've been doing everything up until this point. There are a few of you out there, and you already know who you are, who maybe didn't have computers or internet access or for whatever reason didn't have something work out, and so you've not been doing the science lessons up until this point. And if that's you, then you should be making up all of these lessons, starting all the way back with Lesson 9, the Intro to Light, that everyone else has been doing these past 2 weeks as your spring break. So you don't get a spring break like everyone else, but hey, that's because you weren't doing work these past 2 weeks. You're required to do all the assignments, and you will get graded on everything the same way that everyone else is being graded on those things. Alright, hopefully that clears things up. If you need to do a makeup quiz, then go ahead and knock that makeup quiz out today. I would say study up and try to knock it out and get as high a grade as you can. Alright, moving on. Talking about today's lesson, we're going to be going into some myths in science. I want to bring back something all the way from the very beginning of the year. Remember this? This guy, all the way back from like our second science lesson we ever had, the chain of knowledge. When we looked at the chain of knowledge all the way back then, we said it kind of worked like this. There's at level 1, there's kind of the stuff that you already know, that you already have in your head, and that stuff gets there from the people that that are around you telling you things, and they learn things from professionals who have probably learned those things from researchers, and researchers learn about the world by doing science. And we said science is what happens down here on the chain of knowledge. And then what the chain of knowledge shows is that people tell each other things, and all this information kind of circulates through. Questions come up this way, and knowledge travels on back down. And in theory, with science down here at the bottom creating new knowledge, that new knowledge then gets spread out until eventually everybody knows it. Unfortunately, okay, that's what we said. Yeah, facts, knowledge, and questions circulate through the chain of knowledge whenever people tell each other things. Now, unfortunately, sometimes bad or false information gets caught up in there too. Maybe a scientist, makes a finding that turns out to be wrong, but he already told someone, and they told someone else, and now everybody believes it. Or maybe a scientist, maybe they wrote about something in an article, and it was misunderstood by some professional, and then they went and explained the misunderstanding, and now everyone else is talking about this thing that was misunderstood. And that's how myths get created, when this chain of knowledge kind of breaks down. The problem with the chain of knowledge is that just like true facts and true information can jump from part to part, so can bad or false information. Sometimes we end up believing things that aren't really true. Today, we're going to see 10 of those things. We're going to go through them one by one, just like this. We're starting off with myth number 1. Myth number 1, and this whole lesson actually was inspired by a student of mine in Purdue, so thank you, Jaira, who asked a very good question after our review lesson from our unit on light. She said, how come dogs, because I mentioned in that light that cats and dogs can see ultraviolet light sometimes. You said, well, how can they see that if they're colorblind? And that inspired this whole lesson on all these things people believe, that a lot of people believe that actually aren't true. This is the first one, this idea that cats and dogs can't see color. This is a myth, and it is false. Now, there's a seed of truth in this myth, and we'll see that in a lot of the myths we're about to look at. The truth here is that cats and dogs see less colors than humans, but they can see some. So this little rainbow that you're looking at here should look pretty familiar at this point, because this is the visible light spectrum, all the different colors that human beings can see, from red all the way over here to blue on this side, and all the colors of the rainbow in between. We can see this because of those sensors that we talked about in our retina, in the back of our eyes, that are made to pick up all of these different colors. Now, dogs, and for the most part cats, are pretty similar to dogs in terms of vision. They can see colors, but they can't see as many colors as we can. They can only see these colors here, which are mostly different shades of yellow and blue. So, if you were a human being and you looked at this picture down here, you'd probably see this: green grass, yellow, blue, and red. Whereas a dog would look at this and they could definitely tell apart the yellow and the blue, but the red would kind of look like yellow. That wouldn't look that different from the grass. They can't see as many different colors as we can. They can still see some though. If you were a cat, this is also an example that someone made of the kind of colors cats can see. If you were a human and you looked at a butterfly, it would look like this. The cats would see this, and there's a lot less color in the cat version, but it's still more color than if they were totally colorblind and couldn't see color at all. So again, cats and dogs see some color, but not as much as humans. You'll also notice, if you ever actually watch a dog show where like the dogs are running through the crazy obstacles and whatnot, take a look. What color are all the different obstacles on the course? They're all yellow and blue. Why? Because dogs can see yellow and blue. The people who run dog shows know this, and so they make the obstacles that color. Now, it seems like it's kind of a disadvantage for cats and dogs to not be able to see so many colors like humans can, but on the flip side, both dogs and cats can see way better at night than we can. So this is an example of an artist's depiction of what a cat or a dog would see if they were walking through this town at night, and it's quite a bit brighter. They can see more than what humans are able to see. They have better night vision than we do. Moving on. Myth number 2 is this freaking idea that so many people try to tell me that human beings, we only use 10% of our brains. This is false. Not true at all. The truth is that we use all of our brain. Now, we don't use every part of it necessarily at the same time, but absolutely every part gets used. The scientists who study the brain are known as neuroscientists, and it's called neuroscience because neuro is like a word root that means brain. And now that we've been studying it for long enough, we can make maps of the brain or diagrams that look kind of like this, where we have all these different parts of the brain being labeled with their fancy science names like sensory cortex. But we can also roughly associate all these different sections of the brain with what they do. So for example, the sensory cortex is for your senses. It helps you detect pain, heat, and other sensations. Some other examples are things like the temporal lobe over here on the side is for hearing. What are some other cool ones? The frontal lobe is where you get your sense of smell. Broca's area. Broca was a very famous scientist who studied speech in the brain, and so he found an area where he says it's where speech occurs. The motor cortex, which is kind of this area that runs up around the outside of your brain, kind of like the shape of a headband, is where it controls all of your movement. So anytime that you're moving your hands or your feet in any way, you're using your motor cortex. And all in all, we use all of our brain for some reason or another. Now, one of the reasons people think that this myth is true, that we only use 10% of our brain, is that sometimes people take damage to one part of their brain and are still able to survive. You're not necessarily going to die, even if you take some brain damage from some traumatic accident or maybe from illness or something like that. However, these people usually lose that function of the brain. So, for example, if you have some kind of really bad injury and the part of your brain that manages your memories gets damaged, that's happened to people in the world before, and it really interferes with their ability to remember things from then on out. You can still survive a lot of the time, but you will lose whatever function that part of your brain is associated with. Alright, myth number 3. This one that I'm even a little bit guilty of, because we talked about this back when we were talking about qualitative observations. It's a myth, this idea that humans have 5 senses, being touch, sight, taste, smell, and sound. This really, if you're going to be technical about it, is false. Because the truth is that we actually have many more senses than that. The exact number of how many senses we have depends on what you count as a sense. We have to really think about what this word sense and senses really means. In theory, well, what are sight, sound, feeling, smelling, and taste? They are abilities for you to kind of gain information about the environment around you. You can tell what things around you are like by seeing them or touching them or hearing them. And so if you think about, well, what are the other ways people can assess their environment, get information about it, you can actually think of more things than just, the typical 5 we think of. The exact number, again, depends on what you count as a sense, but this article claims that it's really somewhere in between 14 and 20 senses that we have, and says that the original idea that there's only 5 came from this scientist who lived all the way back in ancient Greece named Aristotle, who at some point in one of his scientific writings said, hey, these are the 5 senses, we all have them. But since then, people have researched it, and they say, no, we disagree, there's really more senses than that. Well, what are some of these extra senses that you have, you might be wondering. Here's one. A really fancy word called proprioception. Now, that's a really fancy word, but it means a pretty simple concept. You can demonstrate your own sense of proprioception by doing this. Take a second to close your eyes. Yes, I mean do this for real. Put down your pencil and close your eyes. Then take your finger and put it just an inch or so in front of your nose. So you're holding it in the space in front of your face, like you're about to touch your nose. You may notice in that moment that even with your eyes closed, you know where your finger is relative to your face. You can tell somehow that it's really close to your nose. That means you have this sense called proprioception, where even without looking, you have a sense of where your different limbs and parts of your body are. You have a sense of your body itself. You can open your eyes again now if your eyes are still closed, but that's an example of a sense that people have. Some other senses we also have are a sense of balance. You can tell that you have a sense of balance because sometimes you lose it if you spin around too much and then you can't stand up. A sense of temperature. You can tell if things are hot and cold without touching or smelling or hearing them. But you have a sense of the passage of time. I can ask you to sit there for 60 seconds, and people can generally tell you if about 60 seconds have passed. We have a sense of acceleration. If you're in a car and it starts speeding up really fast, you know that without seeing necessarily or hearing it. And there's a whole bunch of others that maybe if you go and read some stuff on the internet, you can find out what some of those other senses are. Point is, we definitely have more than 5. Myth number 4, we keep moving, is that if you go outside without a jacket in the cold, you might catch a cold. This is one that I had to argue with my parents about all the time growing up. This whole idea that colds, like, sniffles and a runny nose, come from actually being cold. It's not true. They have nothing to do with each other. The truth is that colds, they are more common in the wintertime, but not because of the temperature. Being cold does not give you a cold. Now, like I'm saying, they are more common in the wintertime, so this is a graph of how many people say they had a cold any given day throughout the year, starting with January over here and then all the months, all the way through to November. I don't know why December's not on the list. What you'll see is that the months with the most people saying they have a cold are like January and February, and then it dips down low in the summer, and then they start going back up again in the winter time. So yeah, a lot of people have colds when it's cold outside, but that's not the reason why. Because diseases or illnesses like a cold, they come from germs. They can't come from the weather, from the temperature. They come from germs. The theory for why we seem to get so many in the wintertime, though, one idea is that what you do in the wintertime a lot of the times is this. You don't go outside very often. You usually stay inside, and you're often at holidays and gatherings with a whole bunch of people all in one room together. And as we know, people can carry germs. So some of these people are, maybe one of these people has a cold, and they're way more likely to spread it in the wintertime because they're inside with a bunch of other people who might have colds. Now, there's also a little bit of truth here that if you ever get like incredibly dangerously cold, like this fella right here, I don't know what he's doing surfing in Lake Superior in the winter, then this can cause you to get sick if you're like outrageously cold. It's a condition called hypothermia. But just being like regular, I went out in the winter for a little bit without a jacket, that's not going to get you sick. The best thing you can do to avoid being sick, like this orangutan right here, is keep washing your hands. Because colds and any kind of disease comes from germs. It doesn't come from being cold outside. Myth number 5 is that the blood in your veins is blue because it doesn't have any oxygen. Now, we've not done a unit on the human body, so you may or may not know what veins are, but veins are some of like the tubes that carry your blood in and around your body. They're what you might see if you ever see like your veins popping out in your arms or something like that. This idea that they are blue, though, that the blood is blue, is false. In reality, here's the truth. It's that the outsides of your veins are blue, but the blood in them is dark red, even if it doesn't have any oxygen in it. Now, this myth comes from the fact that we often diagram the human body and our blood system kind of like this. Briefly, what a vein is, there's two types of blood vessels that carry blood in your body. There's arteries and there are veins. The difference is that arteries carry blood away from your heart and out to the rest of your body, whereas veins carry blood from the rest of your body back to your heart. And so people say the blood in your veins doesn't have any oxygen because the oxygen comes from your heart and lungs, and then they bring it to the rest of the body, and then the empty blood comes back. And the veins are typically shown the color blue like this, not red like the arteries, and that's because the outsides of your veins are blue. You can also sometimes see, if you look at people's hands, especially people who are older, that you can see their veins coming through along their hands, and they look kind of blue. It's true. But in reality, it looks probably something more like this on the inside. An artery is red on the outside and has red blood on the inside, but a vein is blue on the outside, but still has dark red blood on the inside. The actual blood is never blue. Human blood is red, straight up, never changes. Alright, myth number 6. Very common, very old one. People like to say that lightning never strikes the same place twice. This is false. I would love to do a really long unit on lightning because it's interesting, but for now we'll just keep it short. We'll say the truth is that lightning usually strikes the tallest object in an area. So really tall objects like the Willis Tower get struck by lightning all the time, way more than twice. Talk about like 50 times a year maybe, something like that. This is a cool video, a little animation from Chicago at some point when we were having a really big thunderstorm, and you can see where the lightning strikes, that mostly it's striking the really tall buildings. I think that's John Hancock back there, that's probably Trump Tower, and then the Willis Tower, which I grew up calling the Sears Tower, I still think of it as a Sears Tower, is also getting struck right here. It usually strikes the tallest object and strikes the tallest object in an area, not always, but usually. So tall objects get struck a lot. This video is a really cool one. I'll let you watch this one for a second. It's a slow motion video of lightning, and so you can really see how it works. The basic idea is that lightning starts up in the sky from the clouds, and it sends out all these little kind of roots or lines that are searching for something on the ground to touch and to make contact with to conduct electricity. Whenever the first one of these things manages to touch something, find the ground, then a whole bunch of electricity gets sent back up through the ground, and it evens out with the clouds. So the reason that you see this bolt be so bright at the very end there is because the first little thing coming down to touch the ground is this one right here, and it makes that big bolt of lightning. It's a really cool animation. But yes, things can get struck twice by lightning, for sure. If you would still maintain this idea that lightning never strikes twice, well then you'll need to have a very long conversation with this man right here named Roy Sullivan. Roy Sullivan is in the Guinness Book of World Records for having been struck by lightning the most times. He has been struck by lightning 7 times. Call that, I would say, really bad luck, probably. Call it lucky if you want, but that's a lot of times to be struck by lightning. He worked for most of his life as a park ranger, and so he was outside a lot of the time, in the state of Virginia, where they have a lot of thunderstorms, and he got struck 7 different times. This is a picture of him holding a hat of his that was struck by lightning. Yes, people can survive getting struck by lightning. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. It depends on a whole lot of different things, but he managed to survive getting struck by it 7 times and still be in pretty good health. Myth number 7. This crazy idea that people swallow 8 spiders per year in their sleep. This one is just straight up wrong. It's just not true. I couldn't even tell you where this one comes from. The truth is that spiders, for the most part, want nothing to do with you. Spiders eat insects. They can't eat people. They are looking at all times of the day, including the night, to hunt insects. That's why they spin a web, to catch insects. You are not a very good place to catch insects. Spiders are probably going to be afraid of you, even if you're sleeping, because you're breathing, you're moving around, you move a little bit in your sleep, and they want a good, still, quiet area where they can spin up a web and catch insects. So if you feel like you're afraid of spiders, spiders like this one are probably more afraid of you and want to get the heck out of there, and they are not going to go near your mouth. Also, for the most part, most people sleep with their mouths closed. If you sleep with your mouth open, it's probably because you snore, and no spider is going to want to crawl in someone's snoring mouth. It's just not true. This one was made up as a silly fact a long time ago, and it's spread as a rumor since then. Myth number 8. This myth is that according to the theory of evolution, it says that human beings evolved from monkeys. This is just kind of a misunderstanding that I want to clear up. Now, we haven't done a unit on evolution this year. Maybe a future year in science you will. But when you get there, know that this idea is false. Evolution does not say that human beings evolved from monkeys. Instead, what it says is this, that humans and monkeys both evolved from a common ancestor. This diagram is the best explanation I can kind of give for what that really means. So on this diagram, you're seeing 5 different species of animals. We have orangutans, I believe that's a gorilla, human beings, bonobos, and chimpanzees, all different species of apes. What this kind of part of it down here, this whole branching thing is showing you, is kind of like a family tree. It's saying this is kind of how evolution works. This is a super tiny crash course version of a really challenging big idea. But basically that time goes on. This is like millions of years ago down here, and this is the present day. And as time goes on, species diversify. They split into different species bit by bit as people have kids, and those kids have kids, and those kids have kids. And the idea is that human beings, as well as all these different kinds of apes, had a common ancestor all these many years ago that evolved into each of these things. So it wasn't that monkeys evolved into us or anything like that, because monkeys are still around. It's that we all had a common ancestor that was somewhere in between a person and an ape of some kind. So for example, they say that humans, along with bonobos and chimpanzees, shared a common ancestor about 4.6 million years ago, and it probably looked something like this. It was somewhere in between a human being and a chimpanzee. This is I believe they call the species Ardipithecus cadava, and this was believed, because we found fossils of it, to have lived around 6 million years ago, and have been kind of like a human, but kind of like a chimp as well. And if we look far back enough in anyone's bloodline, in theory, your great-great-great-great-great-great times a million grandparents looked something like this. And they had kids who were a little bit more human and a little bit more human until eventually they evolved into human beings. That is what evolution says, not that we came from monkeys. Alright, myth number 9. This is one that we've also talked about in class. Oh, I'm starting to feel kind of guilty about these. Is that eating sugar makes you hyperactive. Actually, not particularly true. Pretty much false there. The truth is that, yeah, we do get energy from eating sugar, just like we've talked about in class, but you also get energy from any other food that you eat, because energy is calories, and any food that you're going to eat has calories in it. For example, if you took a bag of Skittles and you looked on the back of it where it has the nutrition facts, you would see that it has sugar, yeah, but sugar is just one form of energy, and the way that you measure the energy is with the calories up here. So yes, it has 160 calories, but so does any other food that you could eat that has calories, like on a McDonald's menu, and they're showing all their huge numbers of calories down here. No, all of these foods give you energy, but for the most part, you aren't necessarily more or less energetic after eating sugar rather than eating any other like regular kind of food. It maybe feels like you're more hyperactive or crazy or energetic, maybe because that's what you are expecting to feel from eating sugar, or usually it's a pretty fun time if you're eating sugar, right? It's not like you're taking a test or something, it's you're playing around with your friends or whatever it may be at a birthday party. And there's no evidence to show that it actually makes you more hyperactive. There's plenty of evidence to think that parents, my general theory is that kids are kind of just crazy all the time, and parents are looking for reasons to explain why their kids are being crazy. And so like to say, oh, maybe it was the sugar that's making them throw dice at each other and scream and tackle and play with each other, but it's really just kids that are being crazy. And scientists have actually done experiments, they've done tests, where they've given one group of kids a bunch of sugar, and another group of kids nothing, or they've given them something that has artificial sweeteners, where it's not actually sugar, but it might taste like it has sugar in it, and there's no actual difference in how crazy or hyperactive the kids get. It's a myth. Alright, our last one for today, myth number 10, is that it is safe to eat food you dropped on the ground if you pick it up before 5 seconds. In other words, this is known as the 5-second rule, where someone drops some food on the ground, and they say, oh, quick, pick it up and eat it. 5-second rule. If you do it fast enough, then it's not dangerous to eat. This, ladies and gentlemen, is false. The amount of time really has no bearing on how safe or unsafe food is to eat after you drop it on the ground. Here's the truth. Food can pick up bacteria almost immediately from the ground, and up to you whether you want to eat it. Eat it if you dare, is what I would say. The amount of time, though, whether it's less or more than 5 seconds, doesn't actually make any difference. This is one of the earliest myths that I saw that I found out to be a myth because it's actually on an episode of Mythbusters with our friends Jamie and Adam. They tested this using bacteria cultures and science, and they were very specific about it and found that it made no difference. Basically, they took a whole bunch of food and they dropped it on the ground for 2 seconds versus 6 seconds. And then they swabbed it and they tested how much bacteria was on that food that could get you sick, and they found that that amount of time made no difference at all. What they did find made a difference was the kind of food that was being dropped on the ground. So, for example, if they dropped a really dry food on the ground, like crackers or chips or something like that, it picked up very little bacteria from the ground, versus the kind of like wet, or you could almost say sticky foods, like there's some like roast beef here, probably if you dropped like a piece of cheese on the ground, those pick up a lot more bacteria. And whatever you pick up, they pick it up right away. It doesn't matter if it's 2 seconds or 10 seconds or whatever. What matters if it's a dry versus a wet food. You can still eat food from the ground if you want to. A lot of people do. Mr. Manta sometimes does. But there's a chance it might make you sick. If it doesn't make you sick, then hey, it might strengthen your immune system and make you even better at fighting off germs. Your choice. Alright, so now that we've talked about 10 different myths, it does kind of lead us to this central question that I think about a lot. It drives me crazy. Why do so many people believe things that aren't true? How do these ideas get out there in the first place, and how do so many people have the wrong idea about all these different things? Well, I like to think that there's two major reasons why this happens. The first reason is that we like to believe these myths and these rumors. They're the kinds of ideas that are kind of fun to believe in, or they make our lives easier to believe in them. So, for example, we said earlier that eating sugar does not make kids hyperactive. There's no evidence at all to show that eating sugar makes you hyperactive. But if this little boy just had some sugar, and he's feeling like running around and playing and being crazy, he is happy to believe that it's because of the sugar that's making him go so crazy. So he has an excuse to play in a roughhouse and go nuts. He's going, I'm not crazy, it's just the sugar. He likes to believe that myth. And his mom, too, is probably all too content to say, my son can't be crazy. I guess it must be the sugar. We like to believe these ideas. We don't like to believe that he's being crazy just because he wants to or he has an excuse. We like to believe that there's a reason, an explanation behind things, even when there's no evidence to support that idea. The second reason, we don't just like to believe them, we like to tell these things to other people. These myths and rumors that we're hearing, they are the kinds of things that people like to tell other people about. I'll give you an example. So, for example, look at these two girls. She's telling this one girl is telling the other girl a secret, and she wants to make it a fun, exciting secret. She's saying, did you know that we eat 7 spiders every year in our sleep? If you knew that, if someone told you that, you would probably want to go and tell a whole bunch of other people. And that's how the rumor spreads. Because you can tell someone a crazy-sounding, quote-unquote, fact like that, and they're going to be like, oh my god, that's gross! And then she's probably going to want to go tell her friends about it, and then they're going to tell their friends, and the idea keeps on spreading. Stuff like this happens all the time. Really crazy ideas, like that we eat 7 spiders every year in our sleep, they get a lot of attention and people spread them. Same goes on, sometimes that's by in person telling secrets, but sometimes that's also on Facebook and Instagram when people share things just because they're crazy, even if they aren't true. This happens all the time. You know what doesn't happen all the time? People don't like to tell each other really lame and mundane facts, like, did you know that there's no evidence that humans eat spiders while sleeping? That conversation never happens. People don't say things like that, because someone would just probably tell you, why would I expect anything else? Like, okay, you just told me that I already didn't think that we didn't eat spiders, so why are you telling me that? Conversations like this don't happen. And so sometimes the truth that we don't eat spiders while we're sleeping, that idea doesn't spread as well as this crazy idea that we eat spiders in our sleep. Because people don't tell each other these things. It's a problem, though, because of fake ideas like this whole sugar makes you hyperactive thing, and you eat spiders in your sleep. If bad, false ideas like that are spreading, then people might use those ideas and do things that are, like, take bad actions because of it. You might be worried, if you think that sugar makes you crazy, you might be like, maybe I'll just stop giving my kid sugar and then they'll stop being crazy. And you'd be really frustrated to find out that that didn't really change the behavior. Or kids might think that it's an excuse to act crazy when really it isn't. If you think that you eat spiders in your sleep, a lot of people might get really scared by that. And, I don't know, do something wacky like sanitize every corner of their room before they go to bed, or try to tape their mouths shut so they don't open their mouths when they're sleeping or something like that. Just because of an idea that isn't even true in the first place. So what should you do about this? About the fact that there are all these myths and all these false ideas that people say that are often not true? Well, there's a few things. I got 3 ideas for you. The first one is to be skeptical of things that don't sound right to you. I don't know if everybody knows this word skeptical, so I got a definition for you right here. Skeptical means not easily convinced, having doubts or reservations. Basically, don't just believe everything people tell you. You should be more like this guy. That's the face of a man who was told that we eat 7 spiders in our sleep every year. It's like, I don't know about that. I'm going to look into that a little bit more. He's not just going to take your word for something. You should be skeptical, too, of things that don't sound right to you. Even something that Mr. Manter, one of your other teachers, or even maybe your parents say. It's good to be skeptical. Second of all is to fact-check things before you share them. Before you go telling people rumors about eating spiders or lightning never strikes twice in the same place, you should check if that's actually true. Now, the internet isn't perfect for this because the internet spreads as many rumors as it fixes, but there are dedicated websites online just made for checking if rumors like these really are true. So factcheck.org is one of them. And you can go on this website, and if you ever hear something like, ooh, I don't know if that's really true or not, you can search for it on factcheck.org, and they will tell you, with scientists and researchers will tell you if it's really true or not. There's also an awesome website I'm a huge fan of called Snopes.com. They do the same thing, but they do even like pop culture and more kinds of things, telling you whether or not things are really true. PolitiFact.com is one that's specifically for politics, because honestly, even a lot of times people who are running for president tell lies, and so there's websites like these ones to check and say, hey everyone, just so you know, that thing that so-and-so presidential candidate said is actually not true. And lastly, just Googling them. Now, Google is not the best. Sometimes it can lead you to things that themselves or just give you more wrong information. But if you took 10 seconds to Google whether or not lightning never strikes twice in the same place, I guarantee you would find all kinds of websites telling you that that is false. It's good to fact check your information. And lastly, do science. Science, the whole process of science is all about encountering myths and figuring out whether or not they are really true. I want to tell you a quick story, and this is part of our last lesson, so I want you to listen up close, because you're not going to have any science for a whole other week. This image that you're seeing right here is the crest of an organization called the Royal Society of Science. The Royal Society has been around for hundreds of years, and for a long, long time, including through the scientific revolution, they were like the premier organization where every big scientist went to share their ideas, and to spread them, and to talk about their scientific findings with one another. You'll notice at the bottom of the crest it has these 3 words that are in the language of Latin. They say nullius in verba. You might be wondering what that actually means. Nullius in verba, in Latin, roughly translates to take nobody's word for it. Don't just trust people based on their word, what they have to say. You could think of it as saying, see for yourself. Because science is all about actually doing the experiment, testing ideas out for yourself. To scientists, this is an incredibly important idea, so important that this person over here even got nullius in verba tattooed on themselves. Mr. Manter doesn't have any tattoos. If I did, I might very well get one that said nullius in verba. See for yourself, take no one's word. And because, after all, science isn't just a collection of facts, it's a way of asking a question. Never forget it. The one thing you need to learn from Mr. Manter's science class. It's a way of asking the question. Alright folks, that is all that we got for today. It is exit ticket time. Go ahead and knock that exit ticket out, and after that, do your independent work, and please, enjoy your spring break. I will be posting on the science class like fun little conversation questions for you guys to chat each day if you want to use that platform to socialize. But you do absolutely not, there's nothing that you have to do for science over spring break unless you have missing assignments, which you should probably go and check right away. I also want to mention today's cool thing. I had to pick a big one because it's spring break, so I picked a really cool website that you can spend some time on if you're bored. This website called Explorable Explanations. The actual website that you have to go to looks kind of funny. It looks like this. It's explorable.es. And this website has a whole bunch of super cool, they're kind of like games, but they're kind of like articles. They're somewhere in between. They have a bunch of like simulations and stuff that help you understand all kinds of different concepts. Some from science, but some just like from life, by playing with all these different games and explanation type things. It's a really cool website to check out. I'm a big fan of it. All right, that's all we got for today. If you are wondering, yes, you have some independent work for today. There's an independent reading and the questions that go along with that. But the first things first to do is knock out your exit ticket right here. And if you still have to, if you see it on your page, make sure you knock out the makeup quiz. All right, I've been really enjoying doing these video lessons with you guys. We will continue on them when we are back from spring break. Hope you've been enjoying them too, and you have an awesome next several days. So long.